Everyone see me? Fantastic. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the Adoptive Mom Summit. I'm so excited and so honored to be here. Hope you guys can hear me okay. If you can't, just put a little note there in the panel. So very honored and excited to be here. I think adoptive moms are amazing. I have an adoptive mom. I was adopted when I was less than 3 months old. I spent a little bit of time in foster care, and I was blessed to have just an amazing mom. And let me tell you why she's amazing. She's amazing because for me, my mom has always been the most consistent, most predictable figure in my life. There have never been any surprises with my mom. It's always been what you see is what you get. And I have always I've always appreciated that, and it hasn't changed. You know, my father was the same way, but we're talking about moms here. And it makes a huge difference. And even when my parents, because I'm 46 years old, so I was, born in 73 and raised in the 70s, and they raised both of us in a very old school way. And some of those practices, of course, weren't in our best interest. But even with that, the whipping and the spanking and the grounding and all the things I really advocate against, I loved and appreciated my mom. And so I'm really honored and happy to be here in this conference with you guys. I'm so excited that you're tuning in, because it's giving you an opportunity to understand your child, your heart. It's going to give you an opportunity to understand them in a different way. And that's really what so much of my presentation is about. I'm having to be on a hot spot here, so I hope that it's not going to impact anything. That's what so much of my presentation is going to be about, is just helping you to understand and see differently. So one of the first things I want to do before I get started in my actual presentation is I want to answer a question that a lot of adoptive moms have, and that is, why does my child seem to target me? Why does my child always seem to focus, their negative behaviors, their negative attentions towards me? And the traditional research, the traditional attachment research, reactive attachment disorder research, a lot of times will say that the child targets the mom because they're angry at the rejection of their biological mom. So they're taking it out on you, the adoptive mom. And that's actually a misconception. That's not true. I'll give you a completely different way to reframe that. Your child has a tendency to focus more on you than anyone else because you are their primary regulatory figure. You are their secure base. You are the person who makes them feel the most loved. You're the person that makes them feel the most wanted. You're the person that makes them feel the most secure. And you know what that means? It means you're also the biggest threat in their life, because every adopted child has gone through the trauma of rejection and abandonment and loss. There's no way around it. It doesn't matter if you got your child from right out of the birth canal into your arms. That adopted child was in a body, in a womb for 9 months, that they are cellularly connected to, physiologically connected to. And that connection is a lifelong connection, and it gets broken. And that broken connection, that is like having half of you, it's like having you cut in half and then having to reform the other half of you. And no matter what you do, you're always going to carry that lifelong loss in your heart and somewhere in the bottom of your brainstem. And so when this child comes into your arms as the adoptive mom, and over a period of time, and it's usually a really short period of time, you become the replacement for that loss. But the challenge is that becoming the replacement for that loss, you also carry with you the threat of that loss. You also carry with you the threat of that rejection. You also carry with you the threat of that abandonment. So this child who loves you, this child who adores you, this child who places their life is in your hands, is in your heart, is now in relationship with someone who can actually make them feel the worst pain they've ever felt before in their lives. So you become a constant source of threat for abandonment and for loss and for rejection. So your child does not target you as an adoptive mom because they're mad at their biological mom and they're taking it out on you. That's total baloney. They focus on you because you are their one source of threat. There's one source of security. Therefore, you become the biggest threat in their life. They focus on you because they love you and they don't want to lose you. And then what happens is fear causes us to do the exact reverse of what it should. Fear causes us to do the exact opposite of what it is that we want and what we desire. You would think that if you love someone and they're your security and they're your point of focus and your point of attraction, you want to love them more and you want to, do all you can to prove yourself to them and be worthy of their love. But fear causes us to do the exact opposite. Fear causes us to worry. Fear causes us to be anxious. Fear causes us to be insecure. Fear causes us to not feel good enough. Fear causes your child to look at your facial expression and feel rejected. Fear causes your child to listen to your tone of voice and feel potentially abandoned. So it's fear that you are seeing in your adopted child, and it's because they are afraid of losing you. And I want you to hold that in your heart. I'm going to create that framework for you in your heart because I believe it will go a long ways in helping you see your child differently. Now I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my PowerPoint presentation. And I will, from time to time, when I do this, I share my screen with you guys. I don't think I can see questions and comments. So please, if something happens with the audio or anything, just hit your mic or Jenna or Kelli, please send me a text message. Okay. All right. Oh, good. I still have my thing over here on the side. All right. Healing through adoption, the impact of adoption on your child's brain and emotions. I'm Bryan+Post. I've been doing this work for 20 years, guys. I'm going to be with you for an hour, and I'm going to try to make your head hurt and open your heart. So let's get on to it. So be sure to follow me on Facebook at Post+Institute. 5 days a week, I do Post Daily Dose, which is the greatest little 10-minute parenting show on the planet, although I have a tendency to go far and above that. But I've been doing this work for a long time, and the basis of my work is to help parents. This is the thing. I grew up in a home that was full of conflict. I grew up in a home that was violent. And it was not violent because my parents were mean people. It was not violent because my parents were alcoholics or drug addicts or bad people. It was violent because my parents were stressed out because they had experienced trauma themselves in their own lives. I had a sister, my adopted sister. She was born exposed to alcohol, possibly drugs. She was 3 months premature, and she spent the first 3 months of her life in an incubator. This child, my sister, well, you could fit her in the palm of your hand when she was born. And so her earliest imprints in life were based in fear and based in deprivation. And what that causes is it causes the brain to be delayed in its development. Stress causes the brain to be delayed in its development. And all of you are dealing with this with your adopted children in some capacities. Well, here's the thing. My sister was traumatized. My parents had experienced their own trauma, yet my parents did not recognize my sister's trauma the same way they didn't recognize their trauma. My mom and my dad were both had alcoholic fathers. My mom saw her dad have a heart attack in front of her when she was 9 years old. My dad's dad was shot in a bar before he got out of high school. And then my dad went to Vietnam. He came back home with severe post-traumatic stress disorder. So there's all kinds of trauma in their personal being, in their lineage, in their generations. Then you bring my sister and I to the table, and my whole focus and my whole motivation, my whole passion, my whole inspiration for doing this work over the last 20 years, which has been taught all over the world, and I've seen the worst scenarios. There's nothing I haven't seen 10 times. I've not just seen it once, I've seen it 10 times. So there's nothing that you're going through right now that I haven't already seen 10 times. But my whole motivation is that I finally realized and recognized that in my home, what was missing was understanding. That was the one key piece. What was missing was understanding. My parents didn't understand my sister, and they didn't understand me, and they didn't understand that we were different from other children, not different chronologically, not different physically, but we were different emotionally. We were more sensitive. We were sensitive children, and we were fearful. That's the way I want to give you that framework for your adopted child right now. You don't have to look at them in any other way than that. That way alone will take you so far in your relationship with your adopted child. They are stress sensitive and they are fearful. Okay, so we'll keep plugging along. All right, so seeing through a trauma lens. I want to help you see your child through a trauma lens. Some of you may have heard a lot about trauma-informed these days, and trauma-informed is fantastic. I love that language. I love that we're thinking, I love that we're thinking about trauma, but here's the problem with trauma-informed. Most trauma-informed, and this is how you can measure it. Most trauma-informed starts off talking about the experiences of the child. We're automatically missing the point. As soon as anything you read about trauma-informed starts off talking about the experience of the child, you know you're already off track. The reason is because trauma-informed starts right here. Trauma-informed starts right here. Trauma-informed starts within ourselves. We have to be able to recognize our own histories. We have to be able to recognize our own challenges, our own pains, our own struggles before we can see it in another individual. Because if we can't see it within ourselves, we're going to be blinded in what we see in someone else, because there really is no difference between any of us. We've all experienced trauma, and let me tell you what trauma is. Trauma is defined as any stressful event which is prolonged, overwhelming, or unpredictable. And what I want to do right now is I want to encourage you to stop thinking about your child. See, here's what I want you to do in this little talk that I give you. I don't want you to think about anyone except for yourself. Because if I can get you thinking about yourself, if I can get you making these connections within yourself, between your own brain and your own heart, then bam, you're going to be able to more readily see it in your child. But if I can't help you really form that connection, I'm not going to be able to really help you see it in your child. And that's really what I want to do. I want to help you understand your child differently, but that first starts by helping you understand yourself. Trauma is defined as any stressful event which is prolonged, overwhelming, or unpredictable. And when that event continues on, unexpressed, unprocessed, and misunderstood, that's the difference between a short-term stressful experience and a long-term, potentially life-altering traumatic experience. So think about the traumas that you've experienced in your life that maybe you haven't even talked about. Now, trauma starts, this is another little thing I want to open your eyes to. Trauma doesn't start just from birth forward. Trauma has the ability and the capacity to start in utero. We know that as early as the 4th week after conception, the fetus can hear. The 4th week, we know as early as the 2nd trimester, the fetus is capable of psychological processing. 2 books right there. The Secret Life of the Unborn Child by Thomas Verney, V-E-R-N-Y, and Sounds of Healing by Mitch Gaynor. I'm probably going to encourage you, the Thomas Verney book, if you had to pick one, it's probably the better one. The Sounds of Healing isn't going to get into, it gets into a lot of other stuff. But as early as the 2nd trimester, we have the ability to start processing psychologically. Let me ask you this question. Where were you? What was going on with you when you were in your mother's tummy? When you were in the womb, what was your experience? Where was mom? Where was dad? Where were they living? What were the family's circumstances? What was the environmental circumstances? What were the challenges they were going through? What are the things that you experienced in utero? John Bowlby, the father of attachment, says that the first 3 years of our lives establish the blueprints for all of our future relationships. The first 3 years of life establish the blueprints for all of our future relationships. That's all of us. That's not just our adopted children. But the decade of the brain tells us that from conception to 5 years is more like those blueprints, because by 5 years, your brain's 93% its maximum capacity. So during that time, you get a lot of imprints that will inform you for the rest of your life. So a lot of times what you're dealing with your children, even at 10 and 15 and 20, has nothing to do about what's going on at 10, 15, and 20, and has everything to do with what's going on and what went on in utero and in those first 5 years. So trauma, any stressful event which is prolonged, overwhelming, and unpredictable. These are all common traumatic events. Many of us hear about them, but the reason I told you what trauma is because you have to put it in that framework of any stressful event. But these are all events that most of your children have gone through and have experienced. Now, what's the common denominator between all of these events? They all occurred in the context of human relationships. Now, why is that important? That's important because of the way the brain does two things. Number one, it impairs the regulatory system. That's the first thing it does. It impairs their regulatory system. Their regulatory system, we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute, is their ability to maintain calm within a window of tolerance. We all have a window of tolerance for how much stress we can handle. And that starts developing from the time we are conceived. So that regulatory ability is impaired by these events. If you've experienced these events in your life, you will have difficulties with regulation, period. You will have difficulties with regulation for the rest of your life. Let me tell you a real funny story. I'm here in New York City right now. I'm actually in a penthouse apartment up on the 15th floor. I've got a great view, and I've spent some time with some special adoptive colleagues of mine. April Dinwoody, she's the host of a podcast called June and April. I really want to encourage you. Check that podcast out. It's so informative. It talks about the impact of race and multicultural adoption, and I was just on it. She's going to be releasing that this month for Father's Day. But that's April Dinwoody, Dinwoodie, and the podcast is June and April. Please, 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 if you are any adoptive parent should check it out, but definitely if you're a multiracial family. And then another friend of hers who I just met, his name's Rich House, and we were sitting down, and let me tell you, this is the first time this has ever happened in my life. We were sitting down at dinner, and I said, you guys, have you ever had this experience that this all adoptees talking, right? All three individuals who've gone through early life trauma, all individuals who I know are stress sensitive and easily fearful. And I said, you guys, do you ever notice how like you can pick out, like you see the smallest things? I said, I can pick out an eyelash in a bowl of lasagna. I said, I see everything. And April said, oh my gosh, I see everything. She said, I had a friend come to a house, and when he left, I saw one of his hairs inside of one of my crystal bowls. She said, why did I see that? I should have never seen that. But I did, and Rich House was the same way. He's like, oh yeah, I see everything. It's that hypervigilant brain that comes from a byproduct of being traumatized. That's the adoptive child's brain. That's the trauma brain. That's the brain your child lives with every single day. They are stress sensitive. When I say stress sensitive, I mean they can experience stress through all sensory pathways. I'm going to get into that in just a moment. But they are just so vigilant. Now, the good thing, because I believe that just because trauma is perceived as this negative event, every trauma, every bad thing has an equal or greater good thing. That same thing allows me to be very perceptive and very intuitive in the work that I do. And it allows me to feel things in my body that other people may not be attuned to. I was just spending time with a family out here in New York, a single mom and her 16-year-old son. And we got into the work, and as soon as we got into the work, I felt a burning pain in my lower back. I mean, it was a searing pain. It had not been there before. And at first I was just uncomfortable as I was sitting there. And then I realized that I was receiving her energy through my body, which is very common for me. But I just hadn't dialed into it right then, and I did. And I said, hey, turn over for a minute. And I put my hand on her back, and I applied some pressure to her lower back. And I said, go into that right there. And she immediately had this breakthrough. And then she told me this whole story about how she's had this chronic back pain. We were able to relieve that in a very short period of time. So common traumatic events, they occur in the context of human relationships, which mean human relationships become threats to the child. All right, regulation, two important terms. Regulation is the ability to experience and maintain stress within one's window of tolerance. It's like, this is the reason these two things are important is when I first started in my career in attachment, and I started as an attachment professional, reactive attachment disorder, that was kind of my expertise, but I kept asking, what leads to attachment? What leads to attachment? And I never could really get a good answer. And then one day, it's like God said, it's stress. And I realized, like, one of the biggest light bulb moments of my entire career, it changed my whole life. I realized that if a child is in a state of stress, and I really want you all to hear this, I want you to receive this. Take a deep breath. I know I'm talking really fast because I want to get a lot of information in for you, because you can always go back and you can listen to this again. Take a deep breath. As long as a child is secure attachment, as long as they're stressed, they cannot develop secure attachment. As long as you are stressed as a parent, you cannot develop a secure bond with your child. So in order to develop secure attachment, you must experience prolonged states of regulation, which is the experience of stress within a window of tolerance. And you must effectively repair states of dysregulation, which is stress outside of your window of tolerance, akin to being stressed out. So it's not just maintaining calm that's important. It's the effective repair of stress when it occurs. That's probably more important than anything. And joy, having fun, laughter and joy are critically important when it comes to secure attachment formation. So I want you guys to let that seep into your heart, because that's life-changing. That's transformative. And I don't make these statements to you because I'm just making them up. I make these statements as not only an adopted child, not only as a child who's been in foster care, not only as a son, not only as a parent. I have two biological daughters, 24 and 15. I have an adopted son who's 26. I don't make these because I've traveled around the world and taught this information to families for 20 years and worked with the most severe families and seen the biggest breakthroughs. I don't tell you this for that reason. I tell you because I know if you understand this dynamic, it will change your life, because I know it to be true. It's only going to make your relationship more challenging. So regulation, the experience of stress within your window of tolerance. Dysregulation is the experience of stress outside of your window of tolerance. I want you to, don't underline it if you're on your computer, because then you get mad at me. It is believed, this is important, make a note of this. It is believed that affect dysregulation, being stressed out, is a fundamental mechanism involved in all psychiatric disorders. This comes out of a quote, Taylor et al. 1997, comes out of Alan Shorer's volume, his tomes on affect regulation and attachment. Affect regulation and the origin of the self. This was in the introduction. It is believed that affect dysregulation it is believed that being stressed out is the fundamental cause of all psychological and emotional challenges. But it's not just psychological and emotional challenges, it's also physical challenges, because we know that 95% of disease and disorder is related to stress in the autonomic nervous system. It comes from Bruce Lipton, a cellular biologist at USC. 95%. So what this is telling us, what this little quote is telling us, which again is transformative, is that it is believed that being stressed out is the fundamental cause of all psychological, emotional, and physical disorders and challenges. I'm going to say that again because it's so important. It is believed that being stressed out is the fundamental cause of all psychological, emotional, and physical disorders. Now, for this presentation, I want you to forget about physical. I'm going to keep you thinking about psychological and emotional. Psychological and emotional challenges. Being stressed out is the fundamental cause of all psychological and emotional challenges. And if this is true, and I'm going to tell you after 20 years, I know this to be true. After 20 years of working with families all over the world, I know this to be true. I know this to be true. You're going to have a hard time hearing this. I just got an email from a parent the other day. She said, I heard you in Colorado give a presentation 10 years ago. And as I was hearing the presentation, and this was the most beautiful email, she said, as I was hearing the presentation, I was thinking to myself, there's no way I'm going to let my kids do this, this, and this. I'm going to teach my kids this, this, and this. And she said, 10 years later, here I am showing up telling you that you were right. And it has only been because we've been able to do the things that you taught that we have been able to build a better, stronger relationship with our children. I'm telling you guys, I'm telling you, this is God. This is not me. This is God's voice coming out of my mouth. The fundamental reason for all psychological and emotional challenges is because of stress. Your children are stressed out, and the reason your children are stressed out is because they cannot maintain that stress within a window of tolerance. They can't regulate the level of stress that they're experiencing in that moment. A stressed out child is an acting out child. An acting out child is a stressed out child, is a regressed child. Because when we stress, we regress to earlier zones of comfort. When we stress, we regress to earlier emotional ages. If your child is acting out, it's because your child is stressed out, which is because your child is regressed. Oh my gosh, I'm going to hit you with something so powerful right now. If you've got an acting out child, here's what you got to do. You got to think about 3 things that you're doing right now, write them down, that are causing your child to be more stressed out. And you have to think about 3 things that you can do as a powerful, amazing adoptive mom, adoptive parent. You got to think about 3 things that you can do right now that will lower and reduce stress in your relationship with your child and in your home. And what you do is you do less of the 3 things that are stressing your child out, more of the 3 things that can help increase love and calm. And you're going to see a transformation unfold. Your biggest challenges is because your children are stressed out, not because your children have a diagnosis. So let's talk about a few areas of the brain. Let me check my time here. Oh, cranking right along. All right, this is important, guys. This is important because everything I can do can be related right back to the brain. And I love it because I can make it so basic. I believe it's very simple. Bruce Perry says that if you work with children, you have to have a generalist understanding of the brain. There's absolutely no reason in the world that every foster parent and every adoptive parent and every kinship placement should not have Brain Science 101, because it's the most basic thing and it can really help our understanding. We start with the amygdala. The amygdala right here is our primal brain. It's our limbic system. It's a part of our reptilian brain. It's responsible for fight, flight, or freeze. It pumps out cortisol. The amygdala sits right on top of the brainstem, your lower limbic brain. Now here's the thing. Your brainstem is where all your trauma memories are stored. All your memories are stored in the brainstem. Your amygdala actually turns on these memories. So anytime you experience a stressful event, now here's something I want you to realize. When I said that your children are stress sensitive and fearful, any time the amygdala perceives a threat, any time the amygdala experiences a stressful event, you can experience stress through any of your sensory pathways: what you see, what you hear, what you smell, what you touch, what you taste, the temperature of your body, digestion, and movement. You have 8 sensory systems that can cause your amygdala in an unconscious way to start pumping out cortisol. When that cortisol starts pumping out, number one, it turns on all the memory systems in the brainstem. So depending on the level of stress, depending on how intense the threat is dictates to how deep within the brainstem it gets stirred. See, the trauma memories are at the bottom. The trauma memories are like you know, when you go into a grocery store and you see a bottle of kombucha tea and there's this sediment at the bottom of the bottle and then it's kind of clear at the top. Well, that's the trauma, right? That's all the muck at the bottom, although it's not muck in kombucha tea. Kombucha tea is really good for you. But you know what I mean? It's the sediment that settles to the bottom. If you put dirt in a bottle of water, eventually the dirt will settle to the bottom. That's the trauma, well, depending on the level of stress. And you can't dictate the level of stress, right? We only experience the level of stress. Our amygdala only receives and reacts to stress. It doesn't respond. Responding requires thought. Reacting is just automatic. So depending on the level of stress depends on how deep down in the brainstem the amygdala gets stirred. High levels of stress stir up all the sediment at the bottom of the water, and guess what? Before long, it's all brown. Because the emotional brain has the ability to dictate to the left brain, the thinking brain. The emotional brain, the right hemisphere, dictates to the left hemisphere. Now I'm going to drop something on you, but it's really powerful. I want you to write this down. In times of stress, our thinking becomes confused and distorted, and our short-term memory is suppressed. In times of stress, our thinking becomes confused and distorted, and our short-term memory is suppressed. When you are stressed out, you cannot think clearly and you cannot remember. When you are stressed out, you cannot think clearly and you cannot remember. This goes for children and adults. So if when we're stressed out as adults, we can't think clearly and we can't remember, just imagine how much more susceptible to stress and confused and distorted thinking our children are. Imagine how much more susceptible to stress and suppressed short-term memory our children are. They can't remember. A child who's stressed can't learn. As long as your child is stressed out, they can't learn. And this comes from Joseph Ledoux, a New York University neuroscientist. Ledoux says that when the amygdala experiences a threat, it pumps out cortisol. The cortisol goes past the pituitary gland and it hits the hippocampus. When the cortisol, the overwhelming, and sending a clear and distinct signal and message to the orbitofrontal cortex, which is your executive control center for executive function, your prefrontal brain, where you start to think and where you start to interact and where you start to engage. If the cortisol coming from the amygdala is overwhelming, then the hippocampus gets overwhelmed. And overwhelming amounts of cortisol for a prolonged period of time, oh my gosh, I didn't put the slide in this that I should have. I might have to try to find it for you guys. Yeah, it's important enough. I want to try to find it. It's going to take too long. I've got a great brain scan. It comes from Bruce Perry in the Child Trauma Academy. It shows a 3-year-old brain, 3-year-old brain of a normal child and 3-year-old brain of a child who's experienced neglect. And the brains are structurally and physically smaller. Lemon compared to an abused child, compared to an apple or an orange or a grapefruit of the normal child. The brain actually is smaller. The children look the same, but the brain size is different. So there are things going on inside your children that you cannot see, and that's the confusing thing, because your amygdala looks for the threat, and all your amygdala does is sees this 5-year-old child or this 10-year-old child who's just like every other kid, looks like every other kid, talks like every other kid, but your amygdala cannot see that child's brain. But here's what your amygdala also does, and you'll find this interesting. Your child emits a vibration. They emit a stress vibration, which communicates to your amygdala. So your amygdala is actually seeing. Your amygdala is actually experiencing the intense vibration of that neglected, abused, traumatized brain. But what you're seeing looks different. See, your amygdala is getting turned on and getting alarmed as if a baby was crying. Who doesn't get a little stressed out when they hear a baby crying, right? But that's what happens when your child gets stressed. They're crying, but you can't hear the cry. All you can do is see the behavior. And because the amygdala is always looking for a threat, you're always focused on suppressing, controlling, or diminishing that behavior. Because that's what the amygdala does. It looks for a threat, and then what we get is we get hyper-focused on when we're focused on trying to control, suppress, and diminish the behavior, we're missing the baby. We're missing the opportunity to soothe the baby, because here's what has to happen. When the cortisol from the amygdala passes to the pituitary gland, there's a structure that sits alongside the pituitary gland called the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus releases a hormone, and this is very important. So the amygdala releases cortisol, the hypothalamus releases a hormone called oxytocin. Oxytocin is your brain's anti-stress hormone. This is so important, so important. Here's what you have to understand. The amygdala releasing cortisol is automatic. The hypothalamus releasing oxytocin is a learned response in the brain. So if you received your child from an environment, an orphanage environment, an environment of neglect, an environment where they were exposed in utero, an environment where their mom knew they weren't going to be able to keep them in utero, and then any other amount of abuse and trauma, then your child hasn't yet learned how to release oxytocin in the presence of cortisol in their brain. And that overwhelming cortisol can damage dendrites in the hippocampus. So there's structural damage that occurs in your child's brain that you can't see, and their oxytocin response is diminished. So your child, over time, they've developed some kind of healthy oxytocin response because they have a baseline ability to function in a healthy way. But what happens is that baseline ability, that ability to release oxytocin in the presence of stress that they've adapted and learned naturally, that hasn't been taught to them because they haven't been held 1,000 times, because they haven't been kissed 100,000 times, because they haven't been, had their diapers changed every time they were wet or dirty, because they haven't been fed every time they were hungry. See, these are all ways oxytocin gets trained in the brain, because they haven't had a loving face look at them that they can turn on those mirror neurons and feel safe and feel happy and feel loved and feel joyful, because they haven't had 10,000, 100,000 repetitions of that. Their regulatory ability is diminished. And because their regulatory ability is diminished, when their amygdala actually gets stronger because it's being exercised all the time. So the amygdala is getting stronger, boom, 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 boom. The hypothalamus and the oxytocin response is getting more and more delayed. And then what happens is that the child gets older and they have a stronger amygdala, and this is where the stress sensitivity comes from. This is where the fearfulness comes from. It comes from the amygdala, and it's not a thinking brain. Your amygdala is not a part of your thinking brain. It's an emotional brain. So what happens is your amygdala and cortisol get stronger, your hippocampus gets smaller. Your children right now get overwhelmed. They get overwhelmed and stressed out because they max out their little immature regulatory systems. And when you get stressed out with them, you're only increasing their cortisol, and you're not helping expand their regulatory system. So you're your child's significant regulatory figure until they can regulate themselves. Proverbs says, raise up a child in the way they should go, and when they are mature, they will not depart from it. The maturity we're talking about is the maturity of your child's brain, the maturity of their regulatory system. Until their brain is mature, you have to keep teaching, you have to keep training. The definition of discipline is not to punish. The definition of discipline is to teach. And if you want to be an effective disciple, if you want to be an effective teacher, you want to make sure that your child is in a calm state so that they can learn. You want to make sure that their short-term memory is turned on and available so that they can remember. You don't want to keep your child stressed out. Keeping your child stressed out through punishment, keeping your child stressed out through shame and deprivation and isolation and blame, that's only exercising a part of their brain that you're working against anyway. You don't want to keep exercising that part of their brain. You don't want to keep fostering that pain. So oxytocin is good, but it's that we can release oxytocin is through eye contact. Another way is through smiling. Another way is through laughter. Another way is through food. Another way is through predictability. Another way is through breathing. Teach your children to breathe. Teach yourself to breathe. Breathe. Another is through music. Another is through play. There's so many ways that we can release oxytocin. We just have to do it. We want to do it more than we turn on stress. Let me keep chugging along here, guys. Here's some key terms for you. Your suprachiasmatic nucleus, and this is another part of your brain that's connected to your hypothalamus. It's a nerve structure, a bundle of nerves that sits right near your hypothalamus. Your suprachiasmatic nucleus is responsible for your circadian rhythms. Your circadian rhythms are responsible for your effective ability to feel hungry. Your circadian rhythms are responsible for your effective ability to feel full. Your circadian rhythms are responsible for your effective ability to get tired and lay down and close your eyes and go to sleep. Your circadian rhythms are responsible for your effective ability to wake up in the morning in a slow, steady way, to say, oh, good morning, thank you, God, for giving me another day. It's going to be a good day. Your circadian rhythms allow you to do that. When your circadian rhythms have been bombarded by cortisol, because that's what cortisol does. When your circadian rhythms are bombarded by cortisol and overwhelm your hypothalamus and then overwhelm your hippocampus, then what happens is your oxytocin response gets diminished and your suprachiasmatic nucleus gets knocked offline. So you're not able to know when you're full. You're not able to know when you're hungry. You're not able to settle yourself into sleep. You're not able to wake up without being a grumpy pants. So you need a parent to help you with these things. I got a couple of little chat things. Let me check here. Yes. Oh, here an occasional disorder. Okay. Yeah, it's because I'm on my hotspot. Sorry about that guy, that gang. Bear with me, you beautiful mamas. Okay. Let's just crank right on along here. Oh, gosh, didn't mean to do that. Go back along, right along with doggy. Key terms to remember, there you go, educational success model. This is just a model that demonstrates to you the states of the brain that your child is in. When your child is in a hyper state or depressed state, they're in a survival and a reacting state. It means they're in their amygdala and their brain state. They can't learn. When they're in a survival reacting state, they can't learn. They can only begin to learn when they move up to a hippocampal state. So what you have to do is you have to get their hypothalamus turned on first. You got to get them responding to you. So when they're down here in the survival and reacting state, you're trying to teach your child anything. You're trying to teach them a lesson. You've given them a consequence. You've taken something away. All that does is create more amygdala activation, and it just hinders their ability to learn. That's why some behavior practices that you use, some parenting tools that you use with your children, you notice that you keep having to use them over and over and over again. It's because you're just stressing your children out and they're not able to learn. So, an hour later, they're doing the same thing. They can't remember. Okay, I think I'm unmuted. Okay. Then we move up to responding. You have to turn on the hypothalamus. Then you have to move up to the hippocampus. This is where learning takes place. And then we move up to your prefrontal cortex, which is your thriving and your integrating. So all of this is, I did this primarily for teachers to realize that when a child is in survival, when they're stressed out, when they're acting out, they're not learning. So stop trying to teach them, because that's just stress them out even more. Work on trying to get them connected. Work on trying to get them grounded. Work on trying to get them present by saying things like, I understand, I hear you, I'm here, I'm listening, tell me what's going on, I want to understand, what can I do for you right now? Not trying to, you need to pay attention to what I'm saying, you need to focus on your lesson, you need to do this, you need to stop doing that. See, none of that stuff helps the brain come back on track. All that does is stress the brain out even more. Okay, guys, I'm going to give you a free copy of my book, From Fear to Love, Parenting Difficult Adopted and Foster Children. All you got to do is go to feartolovebook.com, feartolovebook.com, and I'll give you a free copy. It's a best-selling book. I think we've sold 30,000. Emotional expression. So we all have 3 pathways of emotional expression. This is a concept I want you to try to hold on to. It's going to be maybe a little challenging. I'm going to kick on through this. There are 3 pathways for how we express our emotions, through our attitudes, our feelings, and our behaviors. Here's the problem. When most of us were growing up as children, we rolled our eyes at our children. Our parents said, don't roll your eyes at me. I'll knock your eyeballs in the back of your head. So attitudes were not expressed. They were suppressed. express. So you learn that you couldn't express through your attitudes. If you can't express through your attitudes, how many of you could yell at your parents? How many of you could cuss your parents? No, absolutely not. Not if you wanted to keep breathing, right? Not if you wanted to keep your head on your shoulders. So you learn not to express through your feelings. So your feelings get suppressed. If you can't express through your attitudes, you can't express through your feelings, what can you express? Behaviors? No. How many of you could freely express your behaviors of children? You couldn't, not unless it was good behaviors, right? So you had to work really hard not to express bad behaviors. And if you finally did express bad behaviors, what happened? Bad things happen. Well, what happens if you can't express your attitudes, you can't express your feelings, you can't express your behaviors? Guess what you're left with? Anger and depression. And I call this the trauma triangle. Anger, depression, and behaviors. Anger, depression, and behaviors is a trauma triangle. If you can't express your attitudes, you can't express your feelings, and you can't express your behaviors, you're stuck with anger and depression. And anger and depression have to come out with behaviors because you only have those three pathways of emotional expression. And these pathways are for transition. See, these pathways help us transition. We're always transitioning energy in our bodies. This is so important because we have learned, we've been conditioned. We've been conditioned over generations to believe that when a child rolls their eyes at, that's a bad thing. When a child huffs and puffs at, that's this terrible thing. Even when the child talks back to you, it's like, oh my God, the world's ending. You can't do that. You're disrespectful. You're manipulative. You're controlling. All those are generational messages that you need to turn off. Turn them off. Turn the volume off. Yeah, you're hearing a song you don't like, turn that thing off. Turn those messages off, because attitudes and feelings are nothing more than ways we transition through emotion. Those eyes. We do it as adults all the time. We roll our eyes and we huff and puff and we talk back as adults all the time, but all of a sudden when it comes to our kids, it's like we want to suppress that, and what we're doing is we're driving them further into behaviors. We're driving further to behaviors. And if you live in an environment of anger, depression, and behaviors for 6 months or longer, you're living in an environment of trauma. This is where diagnosis comes from. This is where medication comes from. This is where disruptive placements come from. This is where residential treatments come from. This is where restraint comes from. This is where all of this really hardcore parenting stuff comes from, because parents and families are living in an environment of anger, depression, and behaviors for 6 months or longer. You're living in trauma. Everyone's traumatized. That's why I stopped diagnosing. I stopped diagnosing children 20 years ago. The only thing a diagnosis is really good for is for billing insurance. Otherwise, it's a scapegoat scenario. I don't like to use it, because if you've got a child who's capable of having a diagnosis, and usually they have many, most parents come to the Post+Institute on average having been in 7 years of therapy, and in their children being on 3 to 5 different psychiatric medications. That's when I finally get families. I don't get families when they're just getting their children and they're learning. I get families when they're in crisis and they're ready to disrupt, and they freaking tried everything else that hasn't worked. Then they come to the Post+Institute. And the thing is, when you're living in that level of stress, everyone's capable of a diagnosis. That's why I'm not big into diagnosing children, because I feel like it scapegoats them, because everyone could have a diagnosis. So when I used to give diagnosis, I used to give everyone in the family a diagnosis. Children have to be able to express through their attitudes and their feelings. And I'm going to save you a whole lot of baloney in your relationship with your child. The next time your child rolls your eyes, be thankful. The next time your child talks back to you, say, thank you for expressing yourself to me. What else do you have to say? Because if you don't, if you say, don't roll your eyes at me, if you say, you don't talk to me that way, you're not going to be disrespectful. See, that's that old noise. That's that old trash in your head. Old noise, old trash in your head. If you say those things, you're going to push your child into behaviors, and here's what's going to happen. Your child is going to be conditioned for behaviors. Your child's not going to know how to express their attitudes. They're not going to know how to express their feelings. They're only going to know how to express behaviors. And children become conditioned to express behaviors. Then we get mad at them and punish them because they're expressing their behaviors, when that's the only thing we showed them to do. We've not made it okay to express attitudes. We've not made it okay to express feelings. We've just suppressed those things, and then all of a sudden they're misbehaving, and we're like, oh my gosh. Why are they misbehaving? They're misbehaving because we haven't given them any opportunity to express their attitudes. We haven't given them any opportunity to express their feelings. So they're misbehaving because we keep suppressing them. We do this. Parents do this. We as adults do this. Therapists do this. We keep suppressing their behaviors over and over and over again. The next time your child rolls their eyes at you, say thank you, or don't say anything at all. Let them roll and let them go do what it is you asked them to do. The next time they express their feelings, say thank you for sharing that. Tell me how you feel. I want to know more. What can I do to help? Because that keeps them from dropping into behaviors. When your children can learn to express their attitudes and feelings, it keeps them from dropping into behaviors. Bruce Lee says one of the best lessons in life you can learn in life is to master how to remain calm. And breathing is so important. If there was nothing more that I could teach you guys, I want to teach you the ability to breathe. I want to encourage you, practice your breathing. Inhaling through your nose, exhaling through your mouth. Take 3 to 10 deep breaths. And what that does is it turns on your oxytocin, it lowers your cortisol, it keeps your thinking online. It's so important. And you don't want to tell someone else to calm down. You don't want to tell someone else to breathe. You want to start the process first. When you start the process first, you turn down your own amygdala, you turn down your own vibration. The relationship factor, the only thing that matters is the relationship. The only thing that matters is the relationship. Nothing else matters. Nothing is more important than the relationship, because the relationship gives you the ability to influence your child. As long as you're focused on your child's behaviors, then you're focused on controlling, suppressing, changing. You're not removing. You're not focused on your child. As long as you're focused on the child, you're not connected to the baby. Meet the baby in the physical, in the chronological, the cognitive, and the emotional. So all those are age. Physical, chronological, cognitive, emotional. Always go with the emotional. When you are experiencing stress, when you're seeing your child stressed out, always go with the emotional. They're regressing. See the 3-year-old, see the baby, meet the 3-year-old. It's going to make such a difference in your life. Stop obsessing on the behaviors. If stress model, I'm going to finish that thought. All behavior, the stress model says, I've been practicing teaching this for 20 years. All behavior arises from a state of stress. Stop focusing on the behavior. Start focusing on the stress. In between the behavior and the stress is the presence of a primary emotion. Fear are our only 2 primary emotions. Everything, all negative behaviors arise from stress and fear. So instead of focusing on the behaviors, is what we have a tendency to do, focus on the stress and the fear. Because if you'll acknowledge the fear, if you'll see the fear, you acknowledge it, you stay present to it, and then you calm the stress, the behavior will go away. I'm going to tell you that again. I'm going to say this to you again because it's transformative. If you will focus on acknowledging the fear, seeing the fear, see the fear, don't see the threat, don't see the anger, don't see the defiance, don't see the lying, don't see the aggression, don't see the running away, don't see anything else. See the fear, see the fear, see the fear. You will calm the stress, and when you calm the stress, you will diminish the behavior. That's the stress model. Let me pop on over to this one. Give you something, guys, something real quick. Don't do time out, do time in. Let me back up. Don't do time out, do time in. Children don't act out for attention. Children act out because they need attention. This is very important. Children don't act out for attention. Children act out because they need attention. So instead of sending a child to the corner, which is isolation, remember, I want you to hear me on this. Children are not acting out. Your children are not misbehaving because they are bad kids. Your children are misbehaving because they are stressed out. They've gone outside of their window of tolerance. They've gone outside of their ability to. Your child is misbehaving. Your child is saying, I need you right now more than ever to help me turn on oxytocin in my brain because I am helpless. I am helpless to do it myself. I cannot calm myself. My oxytocin response is not great enough to calm the cortisol that is occurring in my brain right now. I need you to calm yourself down. I need you to breathe. I need you to see my fear. I need you to see my stress. I need you to see that I am not a bad child. I need you to see that I am not trying to target you. I am not trying to make you feel bad. I'm not trying to make you a bad parent. I'm not trying to make you feel guilty or ashamed or anything else. I am simply outside of my ability to calm my stress. Bring your child into you. Have them sit with you. Have them wash dishes with you. Have them fold clothes with you. Have them go for a walk with you. Time in instead of time out. 10-20-10. As long as your child is not at risk of harming themselves or someone else, that's three-phase intervention. 10-20-10. 10-20-10. And this is a parenting technique I've been teaching for 20 years. It's going to reduce the most severe problem behavior in your home right now. If you'll write it down, whatever the most severe problem behavior is right now in your home, if you'll write it down, name that behavior. If you'll do 10-20-10 for 2 weeks, just 2 weeks, every day, that behavior, if it doesn't completely go away, it will diminish by 50%. There's not a mental health professional in the world willing to give you a technique that if you'll practice it, that is willing to or can give you a technique that if you'll practice it for 2 weeks consistently will make a behavior, the behavior that you're dealing with, the most severe behavior you're dealing with, either make it completely go away or reduce it by 50%. It's 10-20-10. You give your child, and it's so simple, you give your child 10 minutes of quality time and attention in the morning, first thing in the morning, before they get out of bed. Sit on the bed next to them. Rub their back, stroke their hair, read them a book, feed them a bottle, whatever you need to do. Lay beside them, put them in your arms, hold them, love on them, kiss on them, nurture them, talk to them, sing them a song. 10 minutes, first thing in the morning. 20 minutes in the afternoon, as soon as they come home from school or as soon as you come home from work. 20 minutes of connecting. Connecting the best way you know how. I'm not going to tell you how to connect. You connect the best way you know how. And 10 minutes in the evening. If you have 10 kids, God bless you, and I hope that all 10 kids don't have severe behaviors. Because if you have 10 kids, you obviously can't do 10-20-10. You're going to have to do 1-2-1. But the point is quality time and attention. 10-20-10, it four times the national average of quality parent-child attention that parents spend with their children in the course of a day. So if you'll do 10-20-10 and 10 minutes in the evening, 10 minutes in the evening for 2 weeks. Okay, let's see what we have left here, guys. All right, real quick. Get in touch with your stress and your fear. That's called reflecting. And then you relate to your child. Relate to your child after you have reflected and got in touch with your stress and your fear and own that. Relate to your child. Just say, you look like you're really scared right now. Or you look like you're really angry. Or you seem really stressed. Tell me how you feel. I feel stressed. How do you feel? That's relating. And then regulating happens automatically. That's the three-phase intervention. Reflect, relate, and regulate. Reflect, stop, take 3 to 10 deep breaths, calm yourself down, ask your child how they feel. That's relating, get it, help them to discover it. If they can't connect to it, just say, I feel stressed right now, and I think you feel stressed too. What can we do to help one another feel better? And then regulation happens automatically. I had a parent once who had, she was 67 years old. She had a 9-year-old adopted child, and every single night was a bath time battle. And she emailed me, she said, every single night I go in my daughter's room, she flips out on the floor, kicking and screaming, acts like she needs a bath. She doesn't want it to, anytime I say it's time to take a bath, she flips out, kicking and screaming. I just jump on her because I don't know what else to do, and I just hold her down until she's calm. Then we go in the bathroom, she sees the bathtub, she starts flipping out again, and she's going to take a bath whether she likes it or not. If I got to get in that tub with her, and even if I got all my clothes on, water splashes everywhere, then we both fall out on the ground exhausted, and then she won't even go to sleep. What can I do about that? I said, here's what I want you to do. The first thing I want you to do is next time you tell her it's time to take a bath and she starts flipping out on the ground, kicking and screaming, I want you to sit on the bed. I want you to take 3 to 10 deep breaths, and I want you to get in touch with how you're feeling. And then I want you to tell me what you're feeling. I want you to email me back and let me know what you're feeling. I don't want you to do anything else. I just want you to sit on the bed. I want you to take 3 to 10 deep breaths, and I want you to email me back and let me know what you're feeling in that moment. I didn't ask her to do a thing else. She called me like 4 or 5 days later. She said, you're never going to believe what happened. I went in, I said to my daughter, it's time to take a bath. She flipped out on the ground like she always does, kicking and screaming. This time, though, instead of jumping on her, I sat on the bed. She said, I felt like an idiot sitting on the bed while my 9-year-old is throwing this big old tantrum. But I sat on the bed and I started breathing. And she said, do you realize that in less than 10 seconds, my daughter stopped what she was doing, climbed up on my lap as if she needed a hug, realized that she didn't, and then she went and got in the bathtub? She said, that was too much for my old heart. I almost fell over. That was the beginning of the end of their bath time battles, just getting mom to calm herself down so her daughter could feel a little less overwhelmed so she could make a transition and go take a bath. What we discovered 6 months later when I went out to work with this family is that this little girl had severe post-traumatic stress disorder around baths. When she was picked up, she had lice so thick on her you could pick it off with your fingers. I told that story in a lecture, and another mom heard me tell the story. So funny, because it's not funny, interesting. The mom had a 9-year-old, and she also had the same 9-year-old. Her name was Christina. Both 9-year-olds' names were Christina. Mom said, I heard you tell the story. This was Dallas, Texas. I heard you tell the story. So I thought I was going to try it because I've always had problems with my daughter taking a shower. So I went home. I was very calm. I went upstairs. I said, honey, it's time to take a shower. Sure enough, my daughter started talking back just like she always does, talking back, rolling her eyes. She said, this time, though, I was very calm. I said, honey, if you need anything, I'll be right there. She said, my daughter actually went and got in the shower. And so she got in the shower. And then she does what she always does. Mom, the water's too hot. It's too cold. I don't like this towel. I need a different soap. Mom said, usually it just frustrates the heck out of me. But this time, I was calm. I went and I got what she needed. And I said, honey, if you need anything else, I'm going to be right there. She said, I just pulled up a chair right there in the bathroom, and I just sat there with her. Mom said, that was the best shower we've had in 5 years. The best shower we've had in 5 years. She said, so I thought I'd go for a home run. She said, my 9-year-old daughter got out of the shower, towel wrapped around her. We sat on her bed. I had her sit next to me. I put my arm around her. I looked at her and I said, honey, what is it about taking a shower that scares you so much? She said, my 9-year-old daughter looked up at me and said, Mom, the guy who sexually molested me made me take a shower with him. Mom knew about the sexual molestation, but she didn't know about the shower. They had been struggling with taking a shower since this little girl was 4 years old. Mom looked at her daughter and said, honey, you don't have to take a shower anymore. You can take a bath. 2 weeks later, when she emailed me, she said, my daughter's taking a bath so fast now I hardly even know she's in and out. 5 minutes. 5 minutes to overcome 5 years. 5 minutes just by looking at the fear and looking at the stress. And that's what I want to encourage you guys to do. One last thing, I've got a camp coming up. It's my post-parenting camp 2019. It's going to be in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. You'll hear more about this from Kelli. August 16th and 17th. This is the most powerful parenting event of the year. This is the most powerful parenting event you will ever attend. Go to postparentingcamp.com. We combine the cognitive, the emotional, and the physiological to help you have a breakthrough in your home. You can bring your children to this camp. We'll actually do some work with your kids too. I'll have youth counselors, so the kids will have someone to attend to while the parents are learning and going through their process. Very powerful process. I really want to encourage you. Take a look at it, postparentingcamp.com. If you have an opportunity, if you're in Oklahoma, or I've got families coming internationally for this camp. So it's August 16th and 17th. I'd love to see you guys. Remember, focus on healing, because healing allows you all the mistakes you need to make. I tell my audiences this all the time: go out and screw up as fast as you can. Because as soon as you can screw up, the bigger you can screw up, what you will do is you'll stop, you'll look at it, you'll think about it, you'll investigate it, and you'll think, what could I have done differently? That's where your breakthroughs happen. Your biggest breakthroughs, your biggest opportunities to heal, to help your children heal their trauma, is when they are in the episode. It's when they're in the behavior problem. Your biggest breakthroughs with your children aren't going to come when they're calm and feeling loved. Your biggest breakthroughs are going to come when they are acting out and they are at their worst. That's when their brain stems opened up. That's when their heart's opened up. That's when they're vulnerable. That's when they're waiting for you to come in with love, come in with the power of love, and just knock out fear. Perfect love and fear cannot coexist. Perfect love casts out all fear. Go for perfect love. We're not perfect. We're always going to struggle. We're always going to make mistakes. We're always going to get stressed out. But you guys are amazing. Thank you so much for bringing these children into your home. I was one of these kids. Thank you so much for finding the space in your heart to love them and to create a home for them. And I know it can be so stressful for you. And I just want you to know that I'm behind you 100%. You can do this. It's just fear. It's just fear. Just calm the fear, calm the stress. Find the love and just hang in there. Don't give up. You're amazing. God bless you. God bless you. And if I can help you in any way, I'm here for you. I'm available to you. And thank you so much, Kelli, for having me. It's just an honor and just a privilege. So thank you, guys. Enjoy the summit.